What if I told you the modern sitcoms we watch today were accidentally created by ancient budget cuts? In 500 BC Athens, comedy was a government funded event. It had huge choruses, elaborate costumes, and there was no limits on who you could roast, including the people signing the checks. Fast forward, 400 BC, the money was gone. Post war crash defunded the stage, and the chorus, well, they started singing on the corner. Then performing comedy became dangerous. Get caught roasting a politician, you can get exiled, or worse. So writers had exactly one option: go smaller, go fictional, go safe. From this new comedy was born four stock characters. You had the braggart, the glutton, the grumpy old man, and the trickster. No chorus, no political targets, just four characters and a scenario. And suddenly, anyone, anywhere could run the format. Sounds familiar. The modern sitcom wasn't a creative choice. It was a force of survival tactic. Comedy didn't evolve, it adapted or died. If you want to see more of the comedy data science and how comedy evolved, please follow, subscribe, share so you don't miss it. Most people think female comedians are a modern invention, but the real pioneers were roasted audiences since 300 BC. And trust me, their stage time was a lot more dangerous than yours. You think a tough crowd at the comedy club is scary? Imagine doing crowd work where the heckler has the power to actually throw you to the lions. This all started with the Atellan Farce. The Romans basically borrowed stock characters from the Greeks, think the village idiot or the greedy old man, and turned them into rowdy, unscripted street theater. But by 200 BC, everything changed. The Roman mime took over. And forget the silent guys in striped shirts. These actors were loud, raw, and revolutionary. They did the unthinkable. They took off their mask. And for the first time, the audience could see every smirk, every eye roll, every genuine reaction. The shift from fake mask characters to raw, in-your-face acting opened the door for an even bigger revolution. Because if you're going to tell a joke about real life, men wearing wigs just didn't cut it anymore. Which leads us to the real kicker. For the first time in Western history, women were allowed on stage, and they were massive celebrities. They brought something totally new to the scene: complex domestic relationship drama. They were the original observational comics, finding the humor in the chaos of Roman life. The crazy part? These women didn't use a script. They worked off basic outlines and leaned entirely into crowd work. But in ancient Rome, reading the room was literally a survival skill. If you roasted the wrong person, or worse, if a joke about the emperor didn't land, you weren't getting just a bad Yelp review. You were looking at an occupational hazard that turned improv into the deadliest gig in history. One wrong joke could actually end in execution. Imagine being the opening act for a massacre. 50,000 people are waiting to watch a man die, and you're the one that has to make them laugh first. You aren't an artist anymore. You're a thermal regulator for a volatile mob. In 100 BC, comedy was indie. It was smart, street-level satire. And as the empire grew, the state realized that a laughing crowd is a manageable crowd. They began contracting comedy troupes directly for the ludi, the official state games. Think of it as the ancient version of a Netflix deal. The government bought the rights to the jokes to turn comedy into a government-funded tool for crowd control. But smart jokes don't work in a stone stadium. You're too far away for nuance to reach the back row. Performers had to rewrite their entire operational manual. They ditched the dialogue and invented blood slapstick. They used grotesque masks and loud crashes and hyperviolence. If the guy in the nosebleed seats couldn't see it, it didn't exist. This wasn't for fun. It was to desensitize the masses. The state paid for this to lower the audience's empathy threshold. If you can turn a beating into a punchline, you've primed the crowd. You make the violence funny so that when the real blood spills, the mob doesn't flinch. They roar. The Roman state didn't just give them bread and circuses. They weaponized the laugh to mask the kill. Look into the ludi. You'll see that comedy didn't die in the arena. It was recruited. As the Roman Empire grew and established new global trade routes, entertainers realized there was new audiences and money to be made abroad. Following this booming supply chain out of Rome, Performers left their home ports, hopped on merchant ships, and sailed across the ocean to reach India. These traveling performers brought a very specific idea with them: a funny sidekick. When this style of comedy reached the royal courts of India, it was adapted into their plays. This led to the creation of a famous character type called the Vidushaka. The Vidushaka was almost exactly like the classic sidekicks back in Rome. He was silly, obsessed with food, and served as a goofy contrast to the serious, perfect hero. The smartest part about this adaptation was how he spoke. While the hero spoke formal, fancy Sanskrit, the language of the elite, the Vidushaka spoke the common street slang of the average person, the voice of the people. Even though they had left Rome far behind and the language had completely changed, the comedic system worked perfectly. It proved that a good joke and a relatable sidekick can work on any stage, in any culture. If you like seeing the origin of comedy unfold, please hit like and subscribe and share. Next episode, we explore how comedy traveled the Silk Road. Until then, please take care. When comedians traveled the Silk Road into Asia, they hit a massive roadblock: the language barrier. As global trade expanded, performers traveled straight into the Han Dynasty, but their traditional comedy routines relied heavily on fast-talking street slang. To survive the trip and keep working, these performers had to make a major change. They dropped the spoken word entirely and lead into extreme physical comedy. By the year 120 AD, foreign illusionists were standing in the Chinese imperial court, spitting fire and performing physical stunts. They combined their imported mime routines and acts of existing court gestures. This new, highly visual style of comedy fueled what was called the 100 Entertainments. It pushed performances out of the elite private courts and into massive public marketplaces. It also laid the groundwork for the highly athletic show, or the clown role. Ultimately, these traveling performers proved that the local language fails, physical comedy is universally understood. As they part ways, we leave and head to the Middle East to see how improv started playing with shadows. Until next time, take care.